Da li je naš region važan za Britaniju i Evropsku uniju? Posredno bismo mogli da probamo da dođemo do odgovora ako bismo se podsjetili da je specijalna izaslanica britanske vlade za Zapadni Balkan na tu funkciju došla direktno sa uloge mesta ambasadorke Velike Britanije u Vašingtonu. Iza Karen Pirs je bogata diplomatska služba. Predstavljala je svoju zemlju u Ujedinjenim nacijama, ali je kruna njene karijere bio period između 2020. i 2025. kada je bila britanska ambasadorka u Americi. Važi za vrsnog poznavaoca američkih prilika i osobu sa sjajnim kontaktima u vašingtonskom establishmentu, posebno u republikanskoj stranci. Kad se prošle godine vratila iz Vašingtona, postala je specijalna britanska izaslanica za Zapadni Balkan i u tom svojstvu nalazi se u poseti Beogradu. To je prilika da sad i direktno potražimo odgovor na pitanje o Srbiji, Zapadnom Balkanu, Britaniji i aktuelnim međunarodnim zbivanjima. Naša gošća je Karen Pirs. Dame Karen Pirs, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
And let me start with your trip to Belgrade. What brings you here at the moment, and what would be the main objectives of your trip to Belgrade?
Well, thank you very much, and it's a real pleasure to be on Newsmax. I'm here in Belgrade fundamentally as part of a regular set of visits to review the bilateral relationship between the United Kingdom and Serbia, but also regional developments. I have the pleasure of meeting President Vučić later, also the Prime Minister, Foreign Minister, and the Patriarch, and some opposition representatives. We're doing really well in the relationship. I think in the last couple of years, we have a number of bilateral agreements covering trade, covering cooperation on organised crime, covering migration. We hope to sign later today one on pharmaceuticals to help Serbians who have cancer. So that's a groundbreaking opportunity, and we're very pleased to have been able to do that. But there is one problem in the relationship, which I also would like to mention to the President and Foreign Minister. Some people in Serbia have accused the British Embassy here of interfering in Serbian domestic politics and of trying in some way to influence the elections. So one of the things I want to do is to point out that all these allegations are unfounded. The British Embassy, the British government, does not interfere in other countries' domestic politics, including Serbia's. And we hope that we can put this incident behind us and concentrate on strengthening even further the bilateral relationship.
When the British Foreign Policy Group hosted you, their theme was why the Western Balkans still matters. So please let me borrow from them and ask you the same question. Why does our region still matter for the UK, but more broadly also?
So I personally have spent about 15 years of my career working in one way or another on the Western Balkans region. So I care very deeply personally about developments here. And the United Kingdom cares because we have a very old history with the region, with Serbia particularly. Nurses came out in the First World War to help provide care to Serbian soldiers and others. They're Scottish nurses, so that goes back a long way. We were here during the Second World War, as people probably know. The room I was staying in today had a photograph of Tito meeting Winston Churchill, and we have tried to continue that relationship with the whole region because it's vital for European stability and security, including that of the region, that the Western Balkans keeps moving forwards and is integrated more closely with Euro-Atlantic structures.
David Lammy, who is the Deputy Prime Minister, but he was the Foreign Secretary at the time, said that the Western Balkans still matters for the UK because of efforts to tackle the irregular migrations. So can you explain what that means in practical terms?
Certainly. I mean, it's one of the reasons, and there is a lot through the Western Balkans. There is a lot of illegal trafficking, illegal and irregular migration that comes into Western Europe, where it's destabilizing, and organised crime also use a lot of those trafficking routes. So there are direct threats to the conduct of crime investigations into the UK, and also for our partners in Western Europe, a lot of irregular migration. That's one reason why the region matters. But it matters also for regions of economy and cooperation. We've been pleased to provide export finance for a number of projects, including in Serbia, helping to improve connectivity. And as I say, it really matters for security and stability. If you like, the Western Balkans region is a missing piece of a Europe whole and free. If you look at the map, the region is entirely surrounded by European Union partners. And while it's obviously up to the people of Serbia to choose their path, if you want to get into the European Union, then although the United Kingdom left, we are very happy to be helpful.
Does this cooperation mean any expectations that Serbia should accept the migrants that the UK does not admit?
I think that's entirely up to Serbia. There's no negotiation or agreement in prospect on that. A number of European countries, not just the UK, are looking at ways to deal with the illegal migration problem. I don't know if any other countries have agreements with Serbia to this effect. What we did do when we hosted last year's Berlin process, which is an initiative about European cooperation, we did introduce some task forces so that all the countries of the region and the UK and the EU can cooperate more closely on things like data sharing, intelligence sharing, border controls. But that's the only agreement we have with Serbia.
Your mandate involves promoting democracy, the rule of law, open society, regional cooperation. So how would you assess progress so far, and how do you evaluate Serbia's performance in meeting those standards?
Well, I think if we were at the end of the road, I wouldn't have been looking after the Western Balkans for some 15 years. So I think it's fair to say enormous progress has been made since the 1990s, but there's a lot more to do. And I would say that particularly of Serbia. I think great things have been done with the Serbian economy, if I may say so. I think when we look at the region as a whole, we do see a lack of good neighbourly relations across the whole region. We see a lack of exploiting the real opportunities for connectivity and economic cohesion. We could make much more of free trade in the region, for example. And then we do worry about organised crime and things like freedom of the media and freedom of assembly. Those sorts of things are really important in a democratic society.
Let me switch gears to your time in Washington. You served as the UK's ambassador to the United States during the presidencies of Joe Biden and Donald Trump. The British press described you as the Trump whisperer. Would you say that's an accurate characterization?
Oh, I'm not going to comment on press characterizations, but I will say that I was fortunate enough to have a very good relationship with President Trump and also with President Biden, and that's what my government, all governments, expect their diplomats to do. It's to get on with, to be able to discuss issues in depth with leaders from all political parties in the country to which you're accredited. And I was very pleased and honoured to be ambassador in Washington, to have the chance to get to know Presidents Trump and Biden.
I also read that you had excellent relations with both parties in America, but that you are especially cognizant of the Republican Party. Is that true?
No, we're even-handed. The embassy in Washington has a very long tradition of making contacts, maintaining networks, maintaining friendships and partnerships with both political parties, regardless of which party is in power. But naturally, day to day, most of your business, your work, is done with the administration in the White House. But as I say, we have a very long tradition of working in a bipartisan fashion across both sides of the aisle, making sure we know all the Democratic and Republican movers and shakers.
The Independent said you had done, quote unquote, a brilliant job and should have stayed in DC even after the end of your term. The newspaper went on to state that doing otherwise was a self-inflicted wound for Prime Minister Keir Starmer because he replaced you with Peter Mandelson, and we all know how that ended. So I would like to ask you, what is the biggest impact of the Epstajn affair on political class in America and Britain?
Well, first of all, I'll just say that it was the honour of my lifetime to be the British ambassador in Washington. And I now have a permanent successor, Sir Christian Turner, who arrived in February in the embassy, and he's doing really well, working really hard with the White House on the current challenges of the day and getting around Congress and all the people who matter in the American system. So I wish him all the best. He's a good friend of mine, and I'm very pleased that he's there. I think the ramifications of the Epstajn affair are still going on, to be honest. I mean, you mentioned Peter Mandelson. You'll have seen what happened to Andrew Mountbatten at Windsor. I wonder what the ramifications will be in America, though. So far, there don't seem to have been any major consequences, but I know the investigations are still ongoing, and like others, I do wonder how much more there is to come. It's obviously an important issue, and I think the ramifications for the women and the girls who were trafficked and abused will continue very sadly for a long time, and I think it's absolutely right that we have them at the forefront of our minds.
President Trump has made statements suggesting that he would reconsider his obligation towards NATO, even suggesting this organization is obsolete. How does the UK respond to such novel American approach to NATO?
Well, NATO is the world's most successful defensive military and political alliance. It brought peace and kept the peace in Europe. That's very important. NATO members are working hard together on current challenges, including Ukraine and the Arctic, and new challenges brought about by things like cyber and quantum. And I think because of that, we can be confident that the alliance will continue. It'll have a strong transatlantic dimension, thanks to President Trump's forceful pitch on money. There's much more burden sharing now from NATO countries who've increased their rates of defence spending, and we look forward to the NATO summit in Ankara later this year.
How do you maintain strong transatlantic relations in this new reality under that kind of uncertainty?
Well, it's a more contested world generally, isn't it? The first quarter of the 21st century has seen a huge range of challenges, global, military, economic, that I think we did not expect. If you look at the end of the 20th century. And it's contested and things are unpredictable and uncertain, but I think the strength of the West is precisely in our allies. America has good allies in NATO and elsewhere, Japan, Korea, Republic of Korea, Australia. These are what mark us out, I think, from the autocracies like Russia and China. And I think as long as we continue to work together in those alliances, on the whole, things will go in a good direction, on the whole.
Mark Rutte, the NATO chief, said that Europe could only dream of defending itself without America. Considering the fact that America does not conceal the fact that it wants to pivot to Asia, and obviously it's involved in the Middle East, would you say that some kind of self-reliance is recommendable for Europe?
I think America can do a number of things at once. And if you like, the military and political and defense system in America is constructed so that she can look at several theaters at once. I think more spending, more defense effort on the part of European nations is wholly desirable. There's a debate in many of our countries about that. And I think if the current challenges in Ukraine and the Gulf have taught us one thing, it's that we need to be more prepared. And I think you will see a much bigger effort on the part of Europeans as they move towards the 5% NATO spending target to be more capable. And it brings other things in its wake. You know, I don't know the exact figures, but for the sake of argument, NATO uses a lot of different tanks. We can certainly rationalise the way we collaborate on defence equipment, and that will be an important part of what we do going forwards.
Is the idea of European defence a realistic one?
I think I'm a transatlanticist. I think European defence, yes, but European defence linked to NATO and linked to the transatlantic relationship, not just because, but quite importantly, because of the nuclear deterrence and the American nuclear umbrella. We also are a nuclear power, and our nuclear forces are also badged to NATO, like the Americans. But the Europeans have acted independently. For example, if you look at Bosnia, the peacekeeping force that's in Bosnia, EUFOR, Operation Althea, that is an EU-led force. It's not a NATO force. NATO also has a presence there, but that force is European. And when we faced the problem of piracy off the Horn of Africa some years ago, again, it was a European naval force that went there.
I'm asking because Germany and France often suggested that kind of idea about European defense.
I mean, I don't think the two things are incompatible. You can have more European defence, and it's right that the Europeans do more and step up more. But the transatlantic dimension has always been important. And I don't think it's a choice between the European Atlantic theatre and the Indo-Pacific. Because if you look at the Arctic, where a lot of sea lanes are opening up because of the melting of the ice, because of climate change, you can see just how quickly one ocean flows into another. And therefore, I think what we're seeing is that security is really becoming indivisible between the Indo-Pacific and the Euro-Atlantic.
President Trump was not satisfied with the British or European response when he asked you to help him and send ships to open the Strait of Hormuz. Can we still talk about the relations between the UK and the US as of a special relationship?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I use the term special relationship because it's a nice shorthand for something that's deep, profound and successful and rests not just on cooperation, but also shared kinship, shared values, going all the way back to Magna Carta after a little bit of difficulty in 1776. But I think, you know, from time to time, we will disagree with each other. That's only natural. It's happened before. The bedrock of the relationship is still there. It's still sound. We have been working very hard on defensive ways to protect ourselves and our allies in the Gulf conflict and to protect British citizens who are there. And we've also been working very hard to have the Straits of Hormuz open. Now, the news this morning is that there will be a ceasefire and the Straits will open. And I don't want to comment on that because I don't have enough information. But we have definitely, as the United Kingdom Foreign Secretary, has been working very hard on that.
Speaking of the war in the Persian Gulf, Trump did say that he's sick and tired of his allies coming after he has won wars. So are you telling me that those kind of comments do not bear any significance to transatlantic relations?
No, of course they're significant. We take what the president says seriously, obviously. However, it is not the first disagreement there has been between the United Kingdom and the United States. Each of us acts in our own national interest. And I've been with President Trump and I've heard him say, you know, obviously I say America first. All countries put their countries first. And I think what we're each doing is standing up for our national interest. What I'm saying is it doesn't disrupt the bedrock and the very solid foundations of this deep and profound relationship.
You mentioned the 2-week ceasefire in the war with Iran. Obviously, it's a developing story. But what I can ask you at this moment is, do you think that political reasons for that war have remained unresolved?
Oh, I don't work on this topic any longer. It used to be one of the things I worked all the time on when I was in Washington. So I don't want to offer a view, I'm afraid, because I just don't know enough about it. But certainly there are lots of issues there, important underlying principles like freedom of navigation that need to be addressed.
Yes, and Prime Minister Keir Starmer had an initiative to open the Strait of Hormuz before this ceasefire. So I guess that means that he put significance to that freedom of navigation.
Freedom of navigation is incredibly important, and we have worked with the United States and others around the world to make sure that it's upheld. And yes, we were leaning in. The Foreign Secretary, the Prime Minister were very anxious to discuss and formulate a plan for the reopening of the straits. We'll have to see what happens now with the news of this ceasefire.
What role can Britain, which is close to both America and the European Union, play in the transatlantic relations and for this region?
Oh, we want to play a helpful role. We want to play a leading role. I think Britain sits almost literally in the middle between America and the European Union, and I think that's helpful. We can see both sides of an argument, maybe, and both perspectives. One of the statements I was always fond of using when I was in Washington was that there's no draw in American sport. And of course, there's lots of draws in European sport. So sometimes we come at issues from different perspectives. And I think Britain can often be helpful in illuminating those differences and finding a way forward. I think we're quite a good problem-solving nation. But I think the really important thing is that transatlantic values are the same. They've been the same since before the Second World War, but particularly since 1941 when FDR and Churchill signed a document that went on to become the start of NATO itself. And in the Balkans, we've long had engagement here. We have forces in KFOR. We're contributing economically through export finance, particularly to Serbia. We have a lot of migration cooperation going on. As I was saying earlier, we really care about what happens in this region. We count as friends the people of the region.
Dame Karen Pirs, thank you so much for this interview.
Well, thank you very much. Very nice talking to you.
Bio je ovo intervju sa Karen Pirs, ona je specijalna izaslanica britanske vlade za Zapadni Balkan. Hvala na pažnji.